Good evening, guys. Welcome back to Between the Ropes TV. Now, we know the heat wave's on, but it's Monday night, we're still live. I've got Ray with me as usual. Ray, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm just melting away in this heat. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm about the same, mate. I'm about the same. So, we'll get straight into this one. Deontay Wilder's first up. Now, obviously, we knew that he was coming back this year. We know that was always going to be happening. And what do you make? It seems like it's agreed he will be facing Robert Helenius in October. It's just rumoured, but what are your thoughts on that fight, Ray?
That's a good fight for him to get back into. That's a good fight. He's not you're not going to put him in with somebody like the loser of Joshua Usyk. You're not going to put him in with somebody who poses too big a risk, who's equally looking for a sniff at one of the world titles should they become available, or a world title eliminator. So it makes sense. He's a European opponent that's been around. We all know what Wilder's about, but he's had this self-imposed hiatus from the sport. I like the fight a lot. Like I said, it's a comeback fight. I would like to see baby steps with him in the sense that the heavyweight belts are tied up, so there's no need to give him Helenius and then go, okay, we're going to go in for Fury number 4. We're going to go in for the winner of Usyk Joshua after they fought Tyson Fury. No, put him in with Helenius. Maybe put him in with somebody like the winner of Ruiz or Ortiz again, or you put him in with somebody like Big Baby, as in Jarrell Miller and not Anderson, and then just go from there. Just wait for an opportunity to come up. We all know what Wilder's about. He's been a world champion, so there's no need to hurry up and push him for and need this fight really, because you'd be waiting for those big fights to happen anyway. So just keep him busy.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I was pleasantly surprised with Helenius myself because I'll be honest, I expected it to be like Chris Arreola or somebody way past their best. I know Helenius is 38 years old, but in fairness, he's very well ranked with the WBA. In fact, he's claiming himself this weekend, isn't he, that he should be installed as the WBA mandatory. So we know that'll be a messy situation with obviously Daniel Dubois holding the regular belt. We'll see how that unfolds. We're just obviously boxing historian Davey. Great to have you on, mate. So let us know, what do you think of Wilder if that fight comes off? I'd love to get your thoughts on that, mate. Ray, the heavyweight scene's bubbling away at the minute, I think it's fair to say. And, I just want, for a quick couple of minutes, I just want to get what you think of the WBA, the belt situation, I suppose, because you can't talk about the mandatory situation without the belt situation.
Yeah.
But I just sort of said that it's going to get messy because, you've got Frank Warren running around, giving the shoulders, saying that Daniel Dubois is going to be the mandatory. Helenius, and, rightly so, he's highly ranked. He's saying, oh, well, I should be the mandatory. How do you see it playing out? And, how ridiculous is it?
Well, I don't. It's just the WBA all over. The WBA is, you look right through the divisions. This is what the WBA do. So unless there's going to be a fight between them, which I don't foresee happening, I just don't see how that situation resolves itself. Don't ask me the best way to resolve it in the future. My opinion, there should just be, I agree that there should be 4 belts. I'm one of those rare breed of boxing fans that I don't believe there should just be one champion in every weight class. I think that's highly unrealistic. And I think from a boxer's point of view, that almost degrades their purse. You end up like the UFC, where they're fighting for peanuts. You need greater opportunities in the sport. That being said, without wanting to digress, the WBA have got themselves in a horrible situation that they've got themselves over multiple divisions. Excuse me. And in terms of the heavyweights, it's easier said than done than to make Dubois, Helenius fight, but it's not as simple as that. You've got all the issues behind the doors in agreement. So I don't know whether to give one fight a priority over the other. But then, in my opinion, you would have to lean towards Hellenius, particularly if he takes Wilder in his next fight.
Yeah, no, I'd love to get. There's a few people in the watching this now in the chat section, guys. WBA heavyweights, it's a joke. I think
I mean, what do you think about Josh? I mean, do you think Frank Warren, for all his shoulder rolling, do you think he may have a point on this?
Well, to be fair, whatever you think of Dubois holding the belt, whether the belt should even exist or not, he does hold the belt. In fairness, so if it's their secondary title, he's the mandatory. Whether there was talk of obviously the Hughie Fury Michael Hunter fight, that being a mandatory then for Dubois, and the winner then faces Usyk. And while the belts are all tied up between Tyson Fury and today Alexander Usyk, that makes sense for me. You get in, it gives Daniel Dubois some good tests. Obviously, Hughie Fury and Michael Hunter well ranked, but then quite rightly so. Robert Hellenius beat Kovnacki back to back, so he's earned his ranking. And then I think the thing that makes me personally tip it in Deontay Wilder's favour is the fact in Hellenius' favour, is if he fights Deontay Wilder next and wins, then realistically he's got a better resume and better run of recent form than Hughie Fury, Michael Hunter or Daniel Dubois. So then you couldn't really argue with Hellenius being installed as the mandatory. Is that fair to say?
And that's the point I was making, particularly if Hellenius was to beat Deontay Wilder, which I don't foresee happening for a second. But if he was, then in terms of credibility, you would have to lean on towards Hellenius, because the idea of people having these belts, that's a problem in the first place. There's too many of these interim belts, these diamond belts, these platinum, gold, ruby coloured England flag belts that are given to allow these fighters to be given preferential status in the sanctioning bodies. So I think that's what needs to be put a stop to and cut out. But until they address that, it becomes impossible for us fans to pick whether we want Dubois in or whether we want Hellenius in.
No, brilliant. We've got a great comment in here. RJ World Sports News, a regular commenter on our videos. So great to have you here.
Richard, mate.
Guys, all hit that like button as well. It does sort of help boost the rankings to get more people on. So do us a favour and hit that like button. But the comment, I feel sorry for many of these guys in the heavyweight division. There's so many names out there in the division who aren't getting close to earning a shot at the title with them being tied up. I'd agree with this. If you think back 2016, Anthony Joshua obviously beat Charles Martin, then added the WBA in April of 17 with Klitschko, and then March 18, the WBO. So for now, over 4 years, 3 of the 4 belts have been with one man. And, I've defended Anthony Joshua because people will try and criticise the age of some of his opponents, but he's either unified or been fighting mandatories, to be fair to him.
Yeah.
But is that too long? I agree with you, Ray. I'm a fan of the 4-belt era, but is 4 years where you've got 3 of 4 belts on one man, is that too long?
No, it's not. I think that's just the way boxing is. I think if, at the end of the day, they're fighting mandatories, but I think if we're in a position where you got to remember Wilder had the other belt as well, didn't he? And Wilder had his opportunities to get those fights made with Joshua, and they didn't happen. So I don't have a problem with people waiting maybe 1, 2, 3 years if they're waiting for the winner of a unification fight between two or more belts being held.
But that's the thing, isn't it? We've not ended up with that ultimate undisputed. I know we got close last year with Joshua and Fury, and then Wilder came back into the mix. But
that's because Wilder exercised his arbitration clause. That's why. If he hadn't,
I do get that. But for me, 4 years, well, three and a half years at the time that we would have seen that fight, is still too long to have not got that ultimate. And I know there's political reasons for it, but I agree with this comment. Some of the top guys, fight each other. It's the same down at, with middleweights and super middleweights, isn't it? Everybody calls for Canelo, but how about fight each other? And then, someone's going to earn the right to get the world title shot because become, look at Dylan White, to be fair, whatever you think of his performance against Tyson Fury, he fought enough names to make, he couldn't be ignored anymore. And I know it took him years, but his resume, it's better than Wilder's. Really, it's up there with Fury's, obviously, other than Fury beating him. So I don't think you could really argue with it. They need to fight each other.
Yeah.
Dom, great to have you in the chat. Loving the chat on the heavyweight division. Yeah, the massive water bottle's gone, mate. I'm just a normal glass of squash tonight with the heat. So, yeah, good to have you in, mate.
Because it wasn't his, Dom, it was Freddie's. That's where it was.
Yeah, he's took it. He's in bed now with it. It's bigger than him, but, yeah, no, he's kicking off. So, Davey, I don't know a great deal about Helenius, guys. I remember Dylan White fighting him a few years ago, but not a guy you've paid much attention to. Wilder top 3 with AJ and Usyk. Wow. I mean, Ray may know this, but Davey, I'd love to know what you think thoughts are on Tyson Fury then, if that's your top 3. I think it's fair to say, and Ray, I'm assuming you'll agree, if not, shout me down. Wilder's boxing ability probably isn't even top 5, top 10 even.
That doesn't matter. I think what you've got to look at is he's got that game-changing power in both hands, so he more than makes up for his lack of boxing ability. So if somebody says to me, Deontay Wilder's in their top 3 heavyweights, although, I mean, they're not just talking about his boxing ability, I would still have to say, I would have to agree with that point. I would have Tyson Fury in that mix because I still don't think he's actually retired. I think he's just doing what Tyson Fury does best and talk a lot. But Deontay Wilder, he's got that game-changing power. So although he might not have the finesse and the skill of a Usyk or Fury, he's still comfortably he's the most dangerous heavyweight in boxing today.
No, that was what I was going to go on and say.
Yeah,
it's the great equalizer, isn't it? Because he can lose 11 rounds in 2 minutes and 59 seconds, but if he lands that shot, it's game over. It's game over,
mate. It's game over.
Oh wow! No, okay, fair enough. I mean, yeah, we'll see. I mean, Tyson Fury, he flip flops like I don't know what, isn't he? He's a walking contradiction. I'm a big fan of his, but today he's retired. Tomorrow he'll come back and fight for free. Then he wants half a billy, as he's calling it. So
still, I've got to agree where Davey's coming from. I mean, he's saying if you're going to add Fury in, you put Fury top, Usyk number 2, AJ number 3, and Wilder number 4. And I think the top 4 are probably a good mile and a half above everybody else. What's really interesting is the batch underneath that. That's what's really interesting.
Yeah, no, I'd back that, to be fair. I think it's hard to sort of discount Fury in or out at the minute, isn't it? I watched Fury Wilder trilogy documentary. Is that the BT one? I watched it last week myself. So, and that is the big thing when you look at Wilder coming back, especially Helenius. I think he's like 6'9". He's a big lump. How much has Tyson Fury took out of Deontay Wilder? That's the question for me.
Well, to be honest, Josh, didn't Tyson Fury say the Wilder fights took a lot out of him as well?
He did, but then in fairness to him, the performance he put on against Dylan White, and, we've spoken quite a lot about how Dylan White really underwhelmed.
Yeah.
But he still, you can fight what's in front of you, and Tyson Fury, for me, a nearly punch-perfect fight, to be fair to him.
Yeah. But I mean, the thing is, when you're in with such a devastating puncher like that, and I mean, you're talking heavyweight, so every punch hurts. Fury's talking about, the fact he had concussion after those fights, and often he didn't know where he was for days on end. Now, I know what you mean. He put on a good performance against Dillian Whyte, but Dillian Whyte was poor. Dillian Whyte was really, really poor. Now, Tyson Fury's probably thinking, I don't want to go for another fight with somebody like a Deontay Wilder again. So although he's emerged victorious, I still agree with that element of truth that Fury's saying, that those Wilder fights were punishing fights for both men. Definitely.
No, I'd agree, and I think this is also a great point. That third fight, it was well documented. Fury, he trained for about 3 weeks, obviously with the sickness that with the new baby that he'd had. So obviously, thank God that he's through the worst of that. But obviously, he had a terrible camp, and I think for me, he did show against Dylan White that he corrected that, and it wasn't sort of terminal for him. Although obviously you can only have so many of those tough fights where you keep dragging yourself off the canvas.
Yeah.
Should we move this one on, Ray?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. BT card.
But I'm more than happy to delay the Ryan Garcia chat because I've got to make an apology to you. So yeah, we'll go BT card. So, Rick, do you want to just give everyone, if in case anyone missed it, give everybody a quick rundown of the card?
Yeah. We'll start off with Nick Ball. Nick Ball was up against a really tough Namibian down at featherweight, and I've been really I was really intrigued by Nick Ball. I thought he was sort of like a come forward, bullish type fighter, but he was really patient. Don't get me wrong, he's really raw, Nick Ball. He's got a lot of work to do. This fighter was up against was a lot taller than him, and he gave away a lot of height and reach. So what was happening with his opponent was he was landing jabs, going on the back foot and following up with a right hand. Nick Ball in previous fights I've seen him would just steaming, rolling, head forward, and then go counter with an overhand right hand. There was a bit more patience in his work. He was waiting for gaps from his opponents, and what was often happening was the Namibian was coming in with the right hand quite low, which will enable Nick Ball to touch him with some left hooks. And that was working quite well for him. He was getting quite a lot of success from that. So Nick Ball, he ended up stopping his opponent. But it was a good performance by Nick Ball. And yeah, he's definitely one to keep an eye on. I'm not tipping him for world honours or anything like that, but definitely he's raw. And if you like aggressive fighters, come forward fighters, keep an eye on Nick Ball. You what, mate?
No, I was just going to add that, I think we can't underestimate the form that he's in, isn't he? He's knocking people out left and right. Obviously, big performance from him stopping Isaac Lowe at Wembley on the Fury White undercard.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, another stoppage win. Totally agree with your assessment on him. And, was that for the WBC silver featherweight title, I think it was?
I believe it was. I didn't take too much, didn't pay too much attention to the actual belt. I had a quick look on BoxRec before, but what I did look at was the performance, because although he can have a good performance, and I like Isaac Lowe, but he is at domestic level, albeit now he is. I wanted to see a step up an opponent on the Commonwealth, you could call it that, because it wasn't world level, and he's obviously not European, and see how he coped then, because everybody was expecting a better performance from Nick Ball, and he delivered that. He didn't rush his work. He was patient. He took some shots on his way inside. But because of the height difference, what do you expect? He's a little bit more subtle in his work, a little bit more. He doesn't need to telegraph his punches so much. If he gets that subtle into his game, it could be a problem later on the line for some featherweights. But moving on, there was a really good performance from Dennis Mccann against James Beach Jr. Davey historian, Davey Fulton, boxing historian, I chat to a lot, and he's a big fan of Dennis Mccann, and I can see why. He's a lovely mover as a southpaw. He really is. He's in and out of range. He's lightning speed. He's really accurate with his punches, and he doesn't miss with the back left hand. He doesn't miss with the back left hand. He really doesn't. James Beach Jr. is no mug. Now, what I liked about Dennis Mccann is he was stepping up from super bantamweight, and obviously James Beach Jr. is established at the weight. He had only lost twice. He had been in some really good company, but he was never in this fight. He was never in this fight at all. Dennis Mccann was all over him like a rash, like a proverbial rash. Anytime James Beach wanted to get out of his shell, you saw Dennis Mccann just circling, just using his feet, just shifting out of range, lateral movement, and he was creating enough distance to not be hit. There was some fancy head movement, which I liked, but really are impressed with this kid. Frank Warren's got a potential star. And it's not often I say this about BT fighters. And I try not to say it as much with the matchroom fighters because I think we often overhype our British fighters a little bit too much. But with Dennis McCann, whisper it quietly because I think want something here. I think he's a good kid. I really do. Onto the Mark Heffron fight. So Mark Heffron fought Lennox Clark for the British super middleweight, the Commonwealth, and the IBF, like an interim IBF super middleweight belt. This was a really, I know I was called loads of fights interesting, but this fight was particularly a crossroads fight. And what I mean by that was, when you look at Mark Heffron, he's had 2 defeats at British title level. He lost to Denzel Bentley and he lost to Liam Williams. And both fights he lost comprehensively. There was no doubt who the winner would be. And I see he lost on the job. A little comment there by Richie. Yeah, I can see Dennis McCann becoming a multi-weight world champion, no doubt. Just needs to see a good check for me first. But if he gets through a good check, he's the real deal. Maybe he won't need to. Yeah, I agree with you, Richie. I agree. I think he does need his chin testing. He does need to be in with somebody who's probably just as elusive or defensively or technically as gifted as he is, who can hit hard. And then we can see what he can do. But so far, he's never been in a fight where you thought he's only just nicked that. He's won every fight comprehensively. He's either got his opponent out of there or won hands down on points. You thought that was a mismatch. Now, that's his style's the type of style that I like to see. Hit and don't get hit. But he's a box puncher. He mixes up with power on the inside. He's got that head movement, the slip punches coming at him. And he can box on the outside as well. And what I like about him is because he's so clever with his feet, he doesn't have a problem boxing taller opponents. He doesn't have a problem boxing taller opponents. He doesn't have a problem cutting the ring off, using his feet to do that. And he can box quite well on the outside as well, even against a taller opponent. Yeah, fair enough. There's levels. There's James Beach Jr. he did that against. And as he stepped up through the levels, he may not be afforded those successes. But so far, so good. He's only a baby in terms of age. And what you need to find, people, is that these lower weight classes, those opportunities to grow through world rankings come quicker because the depth isn't there. Although at world level, it's a stacked division, but British, European, Commonwealth, there ain't that depth of gatekeepers that he really needs to test himself. But getting back on that point about Mark Heffron, so he had it all to prove is where I was going with that. He had it all to prove because he had been found and wanting on British level twice before against Lennox Clark, who had a tremendous win about 16, 17 months ago against Willie Hutchinson. Willie Hutchinson at the time was promoted by David Hay. He was also a matchroom fighter, but he got the fight on BT. He was seen as a big hitter at light heavyweight, that brought him back down to super middleweight to basically have him as a weight bully. And he was getting the better of Lennox Clark in that fight 18 months ago. But then Lennox Clark turned the fight around, caught him on the chin and on the right hand, got him on the ropes and followed up with a left hand and finished the fight. What that told me was that Lennox Clark was really, really strong. He's a physical beast on the inside and he doesn't like to give you any space. And that's how this fight kind of went. Mark Heffron took the centre of the ring, but then went on the outside as soon as Lennox started to come forward, and you could feel the strength of Lennox. Physically, they look like 2 different weights. Mark Heffron is a big lad. Trust me, he's a big lad. I've seen pictures of him next to Troy Williamson, who's been on our show. And he's a big lad, but he looked like a middleweight. Lennox looked like the super middleweight in there. But Mark Heffron boxed wonderfully. He's clearly learned from those 2 defeats. He's back with Joe Gallagher. And he looked strong. He looked strong. He looked powerful. Every power shot he was throwing that was landed on Lennox Clark hurt Lennox Clark. the body shots really. He hit Lennox Scott with a left to the body. He set it up beautifully. He threw a right hand. Threw a jab, then threw a right hand, touched him with a left hook to the body, and then hit him with another right hook to the body, which wasn't as powerful. Great combination. And it was a deserved winner in 5 rounds. So that was it's almost an up match for Mark Heffron. And I know you posted something on social media about him, about this being the right time for him. That was a good win. And then finally, the main fight, Hamza Shiraz, now at middleweight after that controversial win against Bradley Skeet at super welterweight. It wasn't a performance that impressed me, if I'm going to be honest with you, Josh, and people in the chat, and people watching. It wasn't an impressive performance. He did what he had to do. He got the stoppage win. He got dropped himself, so he showed adversity. But he, for his height, he doesn't use his height at all. He's 6'3" at middleweight. He should be boxing at range. He likes to mix it up, fair enough, but he's not quick enough. His hands aren't quick enough, and I don't think he leaves himself too wide open on the inside. And it's slightly disappointing. But overall, if I'm going to be honest, and I'm not lying here, so get this recorded, it was a good call by BT. I don't often say that, but it was a good card for the boxing purist.
Well, I love your assessments on those, Ray. I agree with Hamza Shiraz. Frank Warren talks to him about being possibly the best talent in British/world boxing emerging through at the minute. And that's back-to-back underwhelming performances for him from me. They make a lot about how he's, gone off to America and he's really dedicated and the way he set himself up to be a world champion from day one. The performances are just underwhelming, aren't they? But let us know in the comments what you guys think. It's very well known. Anyone who watches this channel regularly, I love to have a pop at Frank Warren. It's probably up there with my favourite hobby, if I'm honest.
Tell them how you really feel.
Well, this is it, mate. I'm not here to beat around the bush. But I would have to agree with Ray. I think that's Frank Warren's best card. Certainly on those few fights that we just discussed. I'd say it's the best card he's done that I can think of, to be honest.
Yeah.
Recently, anyway.
That's it, Josh. I mean, it's got to the point where you have to really sit down and think, when was the last time we put on a good competitive card? I mean, these were good competitive fights, aside from the Dennis McCann fight. But you've got to remember, on paper, that was a really tricky fight for Dennis McCann because of the pedigree that James Beach Jr. brought to the ring. It was a step up, just like you're saying. So it was a good card overall.
Yeah, it's a good card. Guys, if you're fresh, do us a favour, hit that like button and hit the subscribe button. If you are new, get involved in the chat section. I just want to bring this back, Ray. We had a comment a little bit ago. King Jimbo. Obviously, it's back on the heavyweight scene. Wilder is a hype job. Never thought the Klitschko's, AJ, Povetkin, White Parker, etc. When he finally stepped up, he got smoked in a cherry pick gone wrong. Get that bum out of here.
Ooh, what do you say about this, Josh?
Now, I'm just gonna give it. I've been itching since that comment came in. I was thinking, this is lovely work by Ray, but I'm sorry, I want to talk about this because if Scott was with us now, he'd be having a coronary, wouldn't he? Let's be totally honest.
He would. Yeah, he would have to pick him up off the floor.
But it's such a fair comment. I mean, we have got, and I will say, Wilder was scheduled to face Povetkin twice.
Yes, he was.
And I agree. I think he would have stopped with the way Anthony Joshua stopped Povetkin. I think it's fair to say that Deontay Wilder definitely would have stopped Povetkin. But I agree. I really do. You go Wilder outside of picking Fury. And let's be fair, when that first Tyson Fury fight was made, there was several public emails being leaked, interviews between Hearn, Shelley Finkel, Wilder and Joshua. It was a circus trying to make that fight. And let's be honest, Deontay Wilder thought, right, I'll fight Tyson Fury. He's fresh off the sofa. I'll knock him out probably in quite good fashion. And then the 60-40 he wanted with Joshua is then more realistic, or even he can push for 50-50. And I totally agree there. it went wrong. I mean, we got a great trilogy out of it and some really entertaining fights, but that was designed to get the Joshua undisputed fight, and let's be honest, it never happened. Is that fair, Ray?
Yeah, in a nutshell, I mean that's the reason why he's picked Tyson Fury, isn't it? He thought Tyson Fury was a soft touch, and he was wrong. But the other thing I wanted to say was it still can't be ignored that it wasn't. Although his resume is poor, is out the three of them. I'm talking about Fury, Joshua, and Wilder. His resume is by far the worst. By far the worst. But the Joshua fight, he couldn't make happen. The Povetkin fight, he was willing to go to Russia. That didn't happen. So yeah, I can see the truth and the frustration that Wilder, as soon as he fought somebody who was a live opponent, shall we say, he got found wanted, and that's why the Helenius fight probably is not such a walkover as we may think, because Helenius will bring something. Although I still expect Wilder to win and win comfortably, but Helenius is going to ask him some questions because other opponents, apart from Ortiz in one particular fight, never really got to ask Wilder those questions.
No, I'd agree. I think that's a fair assessment. We'll see how that unfolds now. Next up, and sadly, I'm going to have to actually apologise to you here, Ray. Obviously...
Hang on, you're breaking up there, mate. You're breaking up. What were you saying?
No, that's it. We'll just leave it now, mate. If it's broke up, there's nothing we can do. Oh, before we get onto that, thank God for you, Davey. Yeah, for those that haven't clocked, Ray's moved house, different background.
Yep. I've still got the boxes in the background there, so I'm still, still halfway through, Davey, but we're getting there.
There's no point of talking about Ryan Garcia now, is there? I think Davey's moved us on nicely. We'll skip that. Yeah, totally agree. Another great comment. Oh, King Jimbo back in. Wilder openly admitted on Twitter they rejected.
The same Wilder who never stepped up to fight either Klitschko or Unify and never fought White, Povetkin or Parker. Yeah, potentially.
I'd agree. I think the issue there, Jimbo, was that, Wilder, they had this big thing about 60-40, didn't they? If it was a percentage split, and they wanted a guaranteed downside with the upside. And I think he thought, right, I'll fight Fury, and yes, it'll be for less money, but it'll, it goes and makes that 60-40 with the, the fees that he wanted in addition. It makes it more realistic, doesn't it? I think that was what he thought, and it just backfired. But, I mean, let's not feel sorry for Wilder, because although he lost his belt and's been knocked out a couple of times, and I think most people agree he lost the first fight, he still made a few quid, hasn't he? So it's not.
And also, don't forget as well, Joshua wasn't exactly 100% in on that fight as well. There's since been some rumours that Joshua was made an offer that financially he wasn't too happy about as well. She could put it against.
Well, there was all that.
He turned down.
I was going to say, sorry, Ray. I'm always going to defend Joshua on this because, I mean, like IFL and other channels, but it was like EastEnders, wasn't it, for a good few months talking about it. And obviously, Deontay Wilder personally had emailed Eddie Hearn offering him $50 million, and they were like, right, we're very interested. Send us an agreement, in terms of where's the fight going to be, television rights. And obviously that then never came. And personally, I think Wilder and his team didn't really want the fight, and they just hid behind, well, we've offered $50 million. What more can we do? That's my personal belief.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that was the thing Eddie Hearn, I do remember him saying at the time, Deontay Wilder's getting 5 times his biggest purse, or more than 5 times his biggest purse. Yet Anthony Joshua's not even going to double his biggest purse for obviously an undisputed fight. Now, while people say, well, Joshua makes all the money and, with his different deals and purses, that makes sense, and I get that. However, he built himself with those around him, 258 and Matchroom, to be that sort of commercial juggernaut. So in all fairness, if any of us are getting punched in the face and you're going to gamble on an undisputed fight against one of the most feared punchers ever, you want what you're worth, don't you, Ray? You want your pound of flesh, or you want that check, don't you?
Yeah, but it still doesn't change the bottom line for me. And when I mean the bottom line, I mean the red line. That although Wilder didn't fight Parker, he didn't fight Joshua, he didn't fight Klitschko. Are we saying that they would have beaten Deontay Wilder? I mean, I don't see Joseph Parker beating Deontay Wilder, and definitely I don't see Klitschko beating Deontay Wilder. So, look, he may not have fought him, and I agree. I agree with what you're saying, Josh, and I agree with some of the comments in the chat that his resume is terrible, and he had opportunities to fight those guys. But if we're being realistic, you put him in the ring with those guys, there's a good chance in some of those fights that Wilder comes out on top.
This is a great comment, and I've seen the same rumours. Big rumours that Klitschko's planning on making his comeback soon. He wants to beat Foreman as the oldest heavyweight champion of all time. Now, for me, apparently Klitschko is supposed to be, as in Vladimir, supposed to be in fantastic shape. Obviously, with this, the terrible situation in Ukraine at the minute, obviously it's well documented. They've defended their country and, power to them, genuinely. But, he couldn't beat Tyson Fury years ago. He lost to Anthony Joshua. Yes, it was a 3-0 fight, but again, that's 5 years ago now. Ray, I can't see Klitschko coming back and doing it with the current crop. I think there's heavyweights he would beat, but I can't see him winning a belt. Can you?
No, I don't know whether. Sometimes it takes an adversity such as what's going on in Ukraine to make you think, no, there's more to life. And it gives you a different perspective on life. And I don't know whether he's been motivated by, say, Usyk, Vasily, Lomachenko, and thinks, you know what it is, I'll get back in the ring again. He's more than welcome to do exhibitions if that's what he wants to do. I mean, we've seen Ricky Hatton was going to do an exhibition, but that's been put back in November. Oscar De La Hoya was going to do one, but he had COVID. Mike Tyson's done one recently with Roy Jones Jr. But so recently was in the past, sort of like 12 months or 18 months or whatever it was. But as for going in with a current crop, no, I would leave that one alone.
No, I totally agree. Ray, do you want to just read this comment out and give us your thoughts on this one? It's quite interesting.
Yeah. Wilder rejected $100 million his own deal and took 10. I'm assuming that's $10 million to fight Brazil. Yeah. Wilder refused to unify once again, just like Klitschko. Wilder's own manager and Finkel said they wouldn't be pressuring to a Vlad fight. But I say exactly what I said beforehand. Whether that fight takes place or not, it's about whether or not Wilder comes out on top. And I've seen it. Vladimir Klitschko can cause people problems. He boxed really well against Anthony Joshua, but he doesn't respond well when he's hit. And at some point, Deontay Wilder would land on Vladimir Klitschko, particularly the later years of Vladimir Klitschko. And I would lean towards Deontay Wilder in that fight. So I suppose we can go back and forth all night on, how much he was offered or whether the fight was going to be made. But, what we need to really see is who would have won, because that for me validates the status of Deontay Wilder, because his boxing skills, ring IQ is poor, but his power is more than enough to put some of these heavyweights to sleep. Would he have won those fights? It's no good if he wouldn't have won those fights. We wouldn't be debating it. But the reason why we're debating it is there's a good argument that the guys that you're throwing at me and we're debating about, the likes of Ruiz, even Parker, Joshua, Dillian White, would these guys have comprehensively beaten Deontay Wilder? I'm not too sure.
I say it's a tough one, and sadly, it's hypothetical. I really agree with this comment there strongly. I think he's totally right. Ortiz, if he hadn't been a few years younger, particularly in the first fight, I think Wilder would have lost that fight. And to be honest, I actually thought Deontay Wilder should have been stopped. I can't remember which round it was. The 7th in my head, but I could be wrong. But I actually thought that fight should have been stopped. And, they did Deontay Wilder a real favour by being the champion. They really...
Yeah, you get those favours as a champion. Yeah, you get those favours.
Do you remember that one, Ray? I thought Ortiz had got that.
Well, Ortiz boxed really, really well, but he took his foot off the gas, and that was the problem. Whether it was because of his age or what have you, but he took his foot off the gas, and you can't do that against a dangerous puncher. Like, you've got to be switched on at all times. And I agree. Had he been younger, perhaps he wouldn't have done so easily. But in a day, he didn't capitalize on Wilder. He didn't jump on that chance to get Wilder out, and then he paid the price.
Yeah, some great points off King Jimbo. Again, you're really not a Deontay Wilder fan, and I'm with you, Jimbo. I'm not. I have to respect his power. I really do. But I'm not a fan of his boxing ability. But the entertainment factor he brings in that power, people want to see it. It brings a lot to the sport and the division. Joyce stopping Wilder. Wow. See, now that is a fight. That's probably up there for me in the top 5 fights I want to see. As in Joyce Wilder, because and again, now I get to lay into Frank Warren, because Frank Warren obviously promotes Joe Joyce on the basis, his chin, he's don't know what he uses for a chin, but it's all good. We can do all this. And Joe Joyce's chin at the levels he's fought at, yes, it's very, very good. However, he has not been in with anybody really at true world level. So we don't know how good his chin is, truly, when he steps up.
Good point.
So you chuck him in them with one of the best punchers possibly ever, then we're going to see just how good Joe Joyce's chin is. But
I think
go on, Ray.
I was just about to say, just quickly to this point, I think people are forgetting just how slow Joe Joyce is and just how predictable he is. There comes a point where your chin only takes so much. Do you understand? Where it's heavyweight boxing, when you get the hit clean off somebody weighing 16, 17 stone, you are going to go. And just as you piggyback on your point there, Josh, I can't see that chin standing up to the power that Deontay Wilder's got. I really can't. But go on, I'll let you continue.
No, I was going to go on and say what you've said, so I'm with you. I mean, I don't know if I agree with this. Obviously, I know Chisora was offered to fight him very early on, wasn't he? Sorry, guys.
Yes.
Before I continue, if you're new here, hit the like button for us. It does do us a favour to get more of us in the chat, and let's see how many we can get in. But Chisora was early doors, and at the time, there wasn't really much for Chisora to gain from beating the amateur background, but there wouldn't have been the money in it, there wouldn't have been the real credit in it. So I understand that. And then obviously Joseph Parker, they're still trying to make that fight. That may still be something that we end up seeing
later down the line.
Yeah, it would be speculation, but I think with the WBO situation the way it is, we may see that at some point. Davies back. If Wilder had put more of his Olympic boxing game into the pros, he would have been so much better with his power. Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it, David? His footwork's terrible.
Yeah.
That's fair to say. Anybody can get in a boxing ring day one, and I think your footwork would match Deontay Wilder for me personally. But, he has got that power, but he does need to bring more of that amateur style. Dom's back. Wilder cleans out Joyce. Yeah, Dave, you agrees with that?
I agree with Dom. I agree with Dom, definitely. I think Wilder takes him out. I think Joe Joyce plays into Wilder's hands. He walks forward. He's sluggish. I've seen Milk turn quicker. He really is that slow. And Deontay Wilder's, he's quite quick with that overhand right hand. He's no slouch. I'm not saying he's great by all means, but I think he can be done a disservice to Deontay Wilder. And I think Joe Joyce's style just plays into his hands.
Yeah, I agree with this point as well. It's what we're saying, isn't it? Joyce, Wilder lands. Joyce has got slow hands. No, his timing is very underrated. And let's not forget, it's one of the big questions, isn't it? Because he beat Daniel Dubois effectively with his jab. So his boxing ability as well, it's very good and he gets credit, but I don't think it gets enough. But it's so tough to still say, and it's the same for Dubois as it is Joyce. They're probably each other's best win. So it's tough to then say how either can kick on, because until one of them makes that step up, we're not going to know, are we? That's fair to say, I think, isn't it, Ray?
Yeah. I mean, we'll talk about how good his win was against Daniel Dubois, but he hasn't looked great in his last two fights after that. And Daniel Dubois is perhaps not looked as explosive as he did earlier on. So how good is that win? Is Daniel Dubois really as good as what your old mate was telling us? So it's a tricky one. There's an asterisk on that win for me, and like I say, it's just my opinion. There's an asterisk on that Daniel Dubois win for me.
No, I agree. I think it's one of those wins for Joyce that might age really well. If Dubois, we did say, didn't we, the other week, now he's with Shane McGuigan. If he gets backed and develops like he's got the potential to do, that could turn into being a great win for him, but it's just too early to say. Yeah. And I agree, Davey. I think we said that actually on our reaction to Joyce, that if somebody landed on him like Hammer did, it's potentially game over. And if it isn't, in fairness, then Frank Warren can run around shoulder rolling saying, what a chin. So Joyce definitely momentarily. In fairness, with Dubois, but it was very, very odd little spurts for me. I thought Dubois was showing levels to that, but it's just because Dubois. Let's not forget. I suppose you'd maybe Trevor Bryan now, but other than that, his biggest win's Nathan Gorman, which at the time I know it was for the. I think it was for the British, but
it was for the British. That one was it was the British. Yeah, it was the British, and that they were at the same level at that time. That was a good fight at the time. It was a real good trade fight at the time. But other than that, he was having this due to gatekeeper wins, wasn't he, in the division? So I would have to agree with that. But he's still got a long way to go because that defeat against Joe Joyce was so resounding. I mean, he was never in that fight. He's never in that fight.
No, he wasn't. I've put this comment up for Davey just because it made me laugh. So I thought if I don't put it up, everyone will think, "What is he laughing at?" So,
yeah, well, to be fair, that's what all the fighters call him, isn't it? Oh, it's Uncle Frank.
I'm not a fan of him. I'm sorry, David. He's just a complete melt.
You never mentioned it, Josh. To be honest,
I don't like to go on about it, mate. But we're in good company, so I'll mention it briefly. And this is, I agree with Jimbo. He's more versatile, but you can go back and forth. This is the reason that we want to see the fight. So it's definitely one that I hope we'll see. But sadly, with Uncle Frank, I don't think we'll get to see it because he doesn't really want to match anybody, and he won't risk their rankings now, will he? I think that'll be the problem, as we've said on previous videos. Well, I think I'll have to get into my apology to Ray. Now, it's been a great 10-minute delay, and I appreciate that, guys, for all of your comments. I will say, if you are fresh here, see the numbers keep going up and down, hit that like button for us. It really does help us out. But, Ray, I am very sorry. Another thing I might have mentioned once or twice is just how far ahead I am of you this year in our predictions. But we did say we'd go against it. We both backed a Ryan Garcia win. I backed it for points. You backed it, obviously, for the knockout. And we did get a dominant knockout win. And we saw elements for me in that fight. I'll just give a quick breakdown of it, guys. Oh, sorry, I just seen Davey. No, thanks for joining us, mate.
Cheers, mate.
We'll be back live next week, so we'll see you then. But no, I would definitely think Garcia, he came out and he boxed well. He started fast, didn't he, with that fast hands, the fast jab.
Yeah.
And he showed he could box. But then, everyone's going to have seen it, I'm assuming. But he then went into sort of dominant fashion, didn't he? And Fortuna looked, for me, a little bit lost. And Garcia got 3 knockdowns on the way to a stoppage win. So I do apologise, Ray. I think I'm only 4 points ahead of you now. I think I'd have to go back through the archives and check.
Slowly but surely catching up. But on seriousness, it was a good performance by Ryan Garcia. He needed that type of performance. For a lot was made about the weight, wasn't it, Josh? A lot was made about how it's at 140, not 135. And I was kind of like, look, it's not for a title, so what's the problem? But at the end of the day, it was he dropped him 3 times, and each time he dropped him, Fortuna didn't know what had hit him. At the speed of Ryan Garcia, I'm going to say this now, I haven't seen anybody that quick but potent with the speed. I mean, I've seen people like Gary Russell Jr., quick hands, but not really powerful, but with purpose behind it. the punches. I haven't seen flurries like that since an Amir Khan. I haven't seen
I'd
speedy
agree.
flurries like that since Amir Khan. This kid is quick. And if he can put it together with a better defense, particularly once he's let his punches go in threes and fours, this kid could be decent. It's an interesting time. I mean, he's saying he's staying at 140, isn't he, Josh? I mean, what do you make of that? Do you think he should come back down to lightweight?
No, I don't. You know, a lot's been made about him potentially struggling at the weight. That's, it's not really much of a secret. And, his last two fights to go was aimed at 140, but he'll come down next. Obviously, this fight was made at 135 up until really the last few days.
Yeah.
So I think what that tells us is he can't make the weight anymore, to be fair. And he said himself he'll come back down for the right fights, but he'd like Tank at 140. And that makes sense. Tank won the WBA regular at 140. So, there's no reason for Tank to argue with that. There's one more point I was just going to add on Ryan Garcia. And that's the fact, obviously, a lot was made about him leaving Eddie Reynoso and Team Canelo, going over to Joe Goosen. Joe Goosen, as we all know, is a very old school trainer. And respect to him, because what he's done with Ryan Garcia, or what he looks to have done anyway, I suppose we'll see as time goes on, he's very good. Because I think, you'd have to say Eddie Reynoso is one of the best trainers in the country. And to be fair, he's improving, in the world, and he's improving him. And respect to Garcia, because he was made out to be a bit of a diva, but he's in with an old school trainer, and he's showing improvement. So he's obviously adapted well to the methods, hasn't he, Ray?
I'm still umming and ahhing about that one, because I still see a lot of the old Ryan Garcia there. Ryan Garcia, instead of using his feet to step on range, he leans back. And when he's leaning back, his chin's still up in the air. And that's how Ryan Garcia is getting caught. There's still times when, he's not thinking about his punches that well. So he's usually speeding. He's got tremendous speed. But then if you get used to the speed, and this is the problem that Amir Khan had, when Amir Khan was timed, that's when the problems came. What I mean by that is when you're standing in the center of the ring, or you're throwing your shots in threes and fours or fours and fives, your opponent can sometimes, depending on the quality of your opponent, get used to that speed. Then they adjust, and then they time you. And it's your positioning of your feet, your hands, your body, and that tells you how you're going to take that punch. Now, if you're off balance when you're throwing your punches, because you're so offensively minded, you're going to go down when you get hit clean on the chin. It doesn't have to be a hard punch. Because you're off balance, you're going to go down. And I see that glimpses with Ryan Garcia. Sometimes he can be off balance. Overall, he's got more. There's more thought into his punching. There's more punch into his offensive game. But I need to see that on the defense side, because as he steps up, there's some serious killers in both weight classes. We're going to capitalize that, and there's some serious dons out there. And he really needs to sharpen that up. But so far, so good from Ryan Garcia.
No, I'd agree. Jimbo, obviously, I totally agree with what you're saying about Garcia. How far do you think he can go? And to everyone else who's still with us as well, I'd love to know how far we think he can go.
I would ask people whether they think who wins between Ryan Garcia and Gervonta Davis at 140. I want to know who people think.
See, now, obviously, so Sports World News, very impressed with Garcia. I agree. This is the thing. We had this debate on our preview last week. And for me, Luke Campbell was a bigger win. But I do understand where people are coming from with Fortuna. I think he did look small at the weight.
Yeah.
He didn't even weigh in quite at 140. And I think that always says a lot for me, especially with it being changed at such late notice.
Yeah.
It is, yeah. But I think as well, we talked about this again on the preview, how well he's come back. He was unlucky with To-Go in terms of he boxed well, got a 12 rounds, got that ring rust off, but To-Go didn't really want to engage, to be fair. So he got his 12 rounds in. And then me and Ray were debating last week, well, does Garcia need to box well, or does he need the knockout? And in fairness, he boxed really well, which then led to the knockout. So I was very, very impressed with what Garcia's done. Jimbo's back, looks like he's working on his jab. I'd agree. I was so impressed with Garcia's jab. yeah, agreeing with you, Ray, reminds you of a young Amir Khan.
He does. He's got that speed. You know, he's got the speed. He's got the footwork. He's got the flashy combinations. But I'm seeing a lot more thought in Ryan Garcia's offensive work than when I saw Amir Khan, and that's the key difference, which is a good difference to have at this stage.
No, I'd agree, guys. Do comment to us in the comments and let us know who you think would win out of Garcia and Tank. I think we'll move on to our last section of the night, and that is obviously... Oh, here we go. We have got some comments in even. Against Tank, it's true 50-50. The speed and combo size of Garcia will cause all sorts of trouble. Long reach, but we'll worry about Tank timing him on the inside. I tell you what, I couldn't agree more with you tonight, mate. Yeah, that is genuinely how I see it. So, yeah, I totally agree. Ray, do you disagree with any of that?
No, I don't disagree with that. I think I see Ryan Garcia winning the early rounds. I see Ryan Garcia being a little bit too quick for Tank, but I think Tank will be patient and not throwing. I think Tank will be throwing a lot of feints. Ryan won't be throwing any feints. Ryan will just be looking to hold the centre of the ring, land his shots, and then be off on his bait again. But I think Tank's very clever. Tank will be picking up his rhythm. Tank will be watching his feet. And Tank will be knowing that Ryan Garcia goes back in straight lines. Tank will be cutting off the ring as he's throwing his shots. And I think it'll be a bit like David Avanesian and Josh Kelly in the way he breaks that fight down and closes the distance down. And I think he'll counter him, and I think he'll put him out at this stage. Because I think Tank's a bit more technically advanced than Ryan Garcia. They've both got that knockout power, which is exciting. And Ryan Garcia's far quicker. But Tank's a more effective counter puncher, the more accurate puncher. And you know what I always say, timing beats speed.
No, you do say that, mate, to be fair. Michael C, great to have you with us.
My man. He's on holiday, isn't he? Yeah, he's on holiday,
I don't know what the exact temperature is, but I bet we're hotter in the UK than Greece today. It's ridiculous in here.
Yeah.
But no, we are all good, mate. Have a good holiday. King Jimbo's back at 140 edge, Ryan. Bigger, faster, more powerful.
Yeah.
Worrying how easily... Yeah. No, and again, I'd agree with those points as well. I think I would... I don't want to say 60-40, but I think I'd be 55-45 edging Garcia particularly after their last fights, you know. I agree. I think, you know, King's talking a lot of sense there. And that's what I'm saying. I think Ryan would win the early rounds because he's just way too quick and he's way too athletic. But I think there is a point where Ryan will get timed and Ryan will get countered. And we've seen against lesser opponents, Ryan gets hit. So if he gets hit off Tank, it could be game over. Yeah. No, very good. I think we'll move on to our last topic of the night now. Obviously, for those that don't know, the British Boxing Board last week, they announced a few fights, didn't they? We'll start off at heavyweight, and again, it's one we've talked about very, very recently. Yeah. Fabio Wardley and Nathan Gorman. Now, we won't go on about this one, but we're still agreed, aren't we, Ray? That it's a great fight for both fighters. It's the step up both need, and it's still one we want to see.
Let me mention it for a sec. I'll put the light on, pal.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, for me, Wardley and Gorman are at the point of they need to step up. Gorman's been inactive, but he's back. He needs to step up. This is what that offers. And Wardley, you know, keeps knocking people out. His last fight, we all know what happened there. But these are the fights they need. I'm right on, Ray.
Of course. I think that Nathan Gorman is pretty much at a stage of the career where nothing's really happening for him. He's in fights where he's comfortably the favourite. Fabio Wardley, on the other hand, is come from that white collar background. He's got Dillian White behind him. He's got the juggernaut that is Matchroom behind him. And if he wants to do anything on the world stage, he should be getting rid of people like Nathan Gorman. Nathan Gorman, although he can't call him prospect anymore, but if he loses at this level again,
it's done.
Yeah. I can't see where he goes. He's in danger of becoming a gatekeeper. So this is a really, really interesting fight. I know I say it a lot, but it really is because Nathan Gorman on his day has got enough to trouble Fabio Wardley. I mean,
no, I was going to say it is. I mean, they ordered a lot of good fights in fairness, didn't they? I mean, just going slightly off topic, as we've said here, I agree. I was gutted Luke Campbell retired. And I did want to just bring this up because in all the talk with Garcia and Fortuna last week, I think it's relevant. You know, Luke Campbell, if he could have stuck around for another 18 months, you know, there's a lot of talk of Devin Haney possibly moving on and moving up a division after the next fight with Cambosos, that rematch. Campbell he's more than capable of picking up a world title for me. He was unlucky. The Garcia fight was disappointing. And I do think if he'd have been a touch, I don't want to say younger, but I just think after he put Garcia down, that was his only mistake. He didn't really go after him. And, you know, that was obviously where we now know it went wrong. But I'd agree he had loads left in the tank. I mean, do you disagree, Ray, or is that a fair comment just quickly?
I don't know. There was a lot of talent in that lightweight division. And for me, I've got to put him in the same bracket as Kevin Mitchell as one of the best lightweights to not win a world title. I can't hand on heart say he would have won a world title because there was better opponents. For me, he hit his potential, but there's no great shame in that because he was a tremendous fighter. Yeah. Olympic gold medalist, don't forget. But
troubled Lomachenko.
Yeah, at some parts of the fight. But there was just two good opponents there at lightweight. Yeah.
I mean, this is a great chapo. Thanks for joining us, mate. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Ray, just quickly, do you think Inoue could go down and take Bam Bam's belt? Obviously, I know you're a big fan of Bam Bam. I'm a fan of him as well, but I would obviously, you know, you are passionately behind him. Do you think this could happen?
I'm a big fan of Inoue as well. Huge fan of Inoue. He's on my pound for pound list. He's in my top 3. Do I think he can go on wait and take his belt? I don't think Inoue is going to look down and take his belt. No, he's got the ability to, but I think he's looking at becoming undisputed in his weight class, and then potentially go up to face Stephen Fulton and MJ Akhmadiev.
No, it'll be interesting, Michael. So you're just hotter than us then, mate. Just about, but it's ridiculous here. But no, have a great holiday. And yeah, bang on again with Ryan Garcia. Let's see that big step up now. We've been a bit all over the place tonight, guys. So those that have watched the whole stream, apologies. But back onto the British boxing board. Now, obviously, we said they've ordered some great fights. Troy Williamson and Josh Kelly. Now, it's a northeast belter. There's no other phrase for it. Obviously, there was the talk of the JJ Metcalf that had been ordered.
There was.
No secret. Metcalf, he's got his eyes more at world level. Whether he can pick something up, but obviously we know the belt's at 154. We know that situation. Ray, Josh Kelly, Troy Williamson. We had Troy on, and you saw quite vocal. He wants the bigger fights now. This gives him that for me, does it not?
I think what Troy will probably want is he want to push on for the European, he want to push on for the Commonwealth, he'll want a fight that'll give him a world ranking. But having said that, if he is going to have one more fight at British level, this is the fight, because this is a huge fight in the Northeast where he's from. This fight sells all over the Northeast. You can fill a stadium with this fight. Or definitely, fill out a stadium if the undercard's good enough. If the undercard is compact enough with Northeast fighters, possibly you could get something like 20,000 maybe 15,000 in St James's Park, but they wouldn't want to do it like that. They probably want to just sell out 9,000 in the arena that they've got up there, and that fight would comfortably do that, simply because Josh Kelly from Sunderland, you got Troy from Darlington. Josh Kelly's still a big name. He's still got a big following, and this would do tremendous for Troy's career if he gets a win against Josh Kelly, because of the standing Josh Kelly still has. Because a lot of people are saying the Avanesian fight was just too early for Josh Kelly. It was, but but people are calling it a different fight had they met 2-3 years down the line. But Troy's improving with every fight. He really is. I know he got put down against Mason, but yeah, he's heavy-handed, Troy, and he can box really well. He boxed his way back into that fight. I had him down at one point against Mate Cartwright, but he boxed his way back into that fight. He's not just a brawler, so that makes it a really, really good fight.
No, definitely. I mean, if you want to ask anyone how heavy-handed Troy is, I think, ask Ted Cheeseman, because Cheeseman loves a war.
If you can remember.
Well, exactly, yeah. Cheeseman loves a war. And I'd agree, Troy said it himself on the channel, guys. If you didn't see that interview, check it out. He said it himself that he's never mentioned in that conversation of that domestic scene, purely because he wasn't getting the promotion and, the push behind him, that I think he's now, well, he can't not get, can he? He's new promotion outfit. He's a big name now. Anyone who's seen the Cheeseman fight, if you haven't seen that fight, definitely check that out. There's a few fights in fairness that are worth watching. But no, I'd like to see the Kelly fight before he moves on to European or pushing for world rankings. Lastly, we'll talk about a friend of the channel, Tommy Frank. Now, as we all know, British flyweight champion, and we had the pleasure of going and seeing him defend that last year, to be fair. And he's got hopefully anyway, he's got some big nights coming the second part of this year. Obviously, the British have ordered him to fight Jay Harris, who's obviously, as we all know, been in with, Julio Cesar Martinez. That's a great fight, isn't it, if that can come off, Ray?
Yeah, Jay Harris has been in with some good company of late. If Tommy can get that fight, and if he can win it, if he can look good doing it, then who knows where that could lead.
No, I totally agree. And then it's sort of a double-edged sword, because he's also been put in as the mandatory for the European flyweight title. I think it's Jairo Noriega, but if I'm wrong, I apologise. But, regardless of how we look at it, those are two big fights. And Tommy's been on the channel talking about wanting to push for a European. We've had him on a few times, guys, and Touchwood will be getting him on very, very shortly as well. So let us know, if there's any questions that you'd like us to ask Tommy, because he's potentially looking at a huge 6 months that could potentially, catapult him into world level, really, isn't he, Ray?
Yeah, of course he is, but he needs to get wins from these fights coming up. That's the most important thing. We can't look too far ahead for him, although it's really tempting, and as fans of his, it's really exciting. We've just got to hold back and just hope he gets those wins, and then it's absolutely the world's his oyster. He'll be well ranked, and he'll be in good positions to further his career.
Definitely. I mean, we'll talk about this just before we wrap it up. Chapo Finesse back, and we haven't spoke about him for a little bit, but he is back on the August the 6th card in Sheffield. Campbell Latton's career in the lightweight division. Now, for me personally, what he's done so far is necessary. He had sort of shown the back end of last year. He got a couple of stoppage wins, and he's shown development, Chapo. So he's got the best outfit round him, hasn't he? Managed by 258, his dad, obviously Ricky Hatton, very well known. His trainer, Matthew Hatton, who he's had some success as a trainer, to be fair, but knows his nephew obviously can push him, and then signed with Matchroom, and he's fought on some great shows. I still think he needs to go and right the wrong. I think, was it Garcia he fought? Sonny Garcia's in my head. I could be wrong.
The one we had him down as losing. Yeah.
He lost that fight. I think he'd have to admit it himself, whether he would publicly or not, but whatever. But he needs to right that wrong. But I think Ray, he'll tell you himself, Ray always pumps that you need 10 pro fights before we can make a real judgment. And I think Campbell Hatton is the true definition of that logic, Ray, because, he's had a few pro fights now. He's started to show development, but I think, his fight on the Akoli undercard back in February, for me, it was a step backwards, wasn't it?
I'm not too sure about whether he's kicking on or not. I'm not his biggest fan, if I'm honest. I don't think he should be on these big matchroom shows at all. I think he should be learning his trade in a small hall, doing it properly, instead of going to 10-0 for this kid, going to about 15, 20-0 before we start seeing him televised. I think he's got a lot of learning to do. I'm not a big fan of people bypassing the amateurs and go straight into the pros, having a handful of amateur fights. It doesn't always work. I don't think he was physically strong enough to take on the pros, and we saw that in a lot of his fights. I thought after his debut, he was absolutely knackered. He was absolutely paggered. How many boxers do you see on their pro debut that are absolutely knackered? And he was forcing every single shot. I'm not convinced he's going to be of much success in the pros. Again, that's just my opinion, but I haven't seen it. I haven't seen a lot of him to kind of tell me actually, he's doing this or he's doing that. His last performance was better than previous ones, but he's got a long way to go. He's got a long way to go because the lightweight division, even domestically, is still a challenge.
No, I do agree with Michael. Obviously, you get the leg up because of the family name after his dad. Yeah. And I would just say, Ray, on his debut, I'd agree, obviously he was knackered, but a lot was talked about nervousness. And I personally think, the best performance we've seen from him was when Matchroom chucked him on a Spain card in Bilbao. He went, and the stoppage was slightly bizarre, but that was the best performance. So I think that's the way to go. This Sheffield card, it's not a bad one to be on. There's a lot of young talent on there. Headlined by Dalton Smith. We'll get onto it in a couple of weeks' time, obviously. Yeah. But I think that's the way to go with him. We need to keep him away from these big shows because I agree with you. I think because he's not done the amateur career, your 10-0 sort of analogy that I'm a fan of, I think, for him it could potentially be 20-0.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah, he needs to be on the smaller shows, build quieter. And then while it's great experience, because, how many people can say at this point in their pro career, I've fought at Spurs, he's been on big shows in Manchester. He was on the Gibraltar show with Dylan White and Povetkin. So it's great. But at the same time, if you're not performing, maybe you need to go and be a bit more traditional. I think,
that's the thing. It's all well and good saying you've been on the big shows, but you're not putting in big performances. So people are going to get on him. But I've just seen a comment there from Richie, RJ World Sports News, about have we seen much of that Royston Barney Smith? Apparently, he's the UK's best kept secret. I've been hearing loads of whispers. He turned pro last year. Yes, so he's with Frank Warren, and he's supposed to be turning pro, and had his pro fight. I think he turned over in January. Mm-hmm. I had known him as an amateur, and I'd known him through the funniest of those sources. He was on one of those programs about gypsy travelers on Channel 5, and he was about 14, 15-year-old, and he was on there, and they were talking about boxing. So naturally, I picked up and I followed him on social media. He's not bad. But I think he could be a bit like Charles Frankham. If you guys have heard of Charles Frankham, a gifted amateur, really gifted amateur, but is probably struggling with a transition to turn pro. In my opinion, turning pro too early, where they're not physically matured. Charles Frankham got all the skills in the world. Royston Barney Smith's really skillful, really good counter puncher. But physically, I don't think he's quite ready yet. They're gonna have to nurture him. If they nurture him, which Frank Warren will more than likely do, then he's in with a chance.
There we go. You've both watched the documentary. I've seen bits of it as well. So I had heard of him, but I got fair play, Ray. I couldn't have gone into as much detail as you just did. Guys, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks ever so much for tuning in. As we always say, hit the like button, hit that subscribe button. Now, it's a quieter week this weekend with the boxing. So we've got some very special and unique content planned, haven't we, Ray, that we've not done before. So there won't be lives, but we will be uploading them this week. So get your eyes on them. And hopefully they'll spark some debates in the comments section. So keep your eyes out for that. And we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for being with us again.
Take care, guys.